In this tutorial I'm going to have a look at developing your concept design using sketching. And for this it's ideal if you can have a graphics tablet and pen for input, as sketching with a mouse is quite tricky. So up to now we've brought in 2D images using canvas planes, and we've sketched out a 3D shape using the polygons and a lattice rig. But in this tutorial I want to bring the two together and look how we can use sketch graphics in the 3D workspace, still using canvases. And there are two types of canvases. These ones we imported are normal canvases, and they act just like a piece of paper in the scene. And like a piece of paper, I can draw on it, and I've got these paint tools over on the palette that allow me to just draw on the pieces of paper. If I do a look at whilst the canvas is selected, then I get a true flat view. And my canvas layer editor behaves just like the layers list in Photoshop, for example. So if you have drawing skills and you've got experience with other graphic software, you'll be able to find your way around the paint tools and the layer editor and all the sketching tools within Alias just by exploring and by checking with the help tools. But for this tutorial you don't need any particular sketching skills, as I'll be focusing on using sketching for thinking and problem solving rather than for presentation visuals. So if I wanted to create my own normal canvas, I can say New Canvas from the Canvas menu, choose the orientation of the piece of paper, choose the background color to start with, and then choose the paper size. And that then gets created in my workspace on, in this case, in the top view. And I can just select that as the current canvas and just paint or draw on it as I did before on those imported canvases. But I want to use a different type of canvas from this piece of paper, and it's called an overlay canvas, and that works on the view instead of on a piece of paper. So if I turn off my imported canvases and bring back my 3D model, and I'm going to just set the view up so that I can think about the shapes that I'm working on. So I'll toggle the model off, I'll toggle the grid off, and then I might use the interface user colors to change the background color to just being a bit darker, so I get some nice contrast, which helps me to focus on the shape of the model. Now an overlay canvas works on just one view, so if I get the view I want, and up on the canvas menu I can now say New Overlay Canvas. And just note here that it creates a thing called a bookmark, which I'll show you later. And now I can just sketch on the view, and using exactly the same tools as I used while sketching on the canvas planes that were like a piece of paper. And I can use this, for example, for annotation. So if I want to either think of ideas for myself or communicate them to other people, I can just sketch on that view. I also use it for thinking about patch layout. So if I'm wanting to imagine how am I going to create my curves and my surface patches to build the shape, then I'll quite often just sketch or doodle on the model to just help my thinking. And as soon as I tumble away, I lose those sketches. But you notice here I've got a bookmark on the view menu, and that allows me to go back to it at any point. So I can either use the bookmark lister over there, or the page up, page down will cycle between them as well. So I can have as many of these overlay canvases as I like. And if I now just go to a different view and start to click in the window, then it'll automatically create me an overlay canvas when I'm using any of the paint tools. Up at the top I've got shortcuts for modifying the tools, so I'm just going to grab this color here, and I'm going to have a look at remodeling the back end from this roughly sculpted polygon model and try and get it closer to the sketch views that I brought in, so we get a bit more character in the back there. So I'm just simply picking up the background color or picking up the model color, and then just roughing in some ideas for modifying at the back. So this would be exactly the same as if you just took a screen grab and then either printed it out and sketched over it, or took it into Photoshop and sketched over it. And because you've got the bookmarks, you can toggle between the original and your rough sketch. So it's a very simple technique, but quite useful if you just want to try ideas out at the concept stage. So far my sketching on my canvas overlays have just been for one view, and they disappear when I tumble around. But we do have another technique where we can actually sketch directly onto the 3D model. And this relies on using, instead of using the diagnostic shade, we use the hardware shade on the window display menu. Now this is something I'm not teaching in detail in these tutorials, but I'll just show you this technique, and if it's something that looks useful, then you can spend a bit more time learning about the hardware shade from the tutorials. Now here I've sketched just like I did before on an overlay canvas, and it disappears when I tumble away from the view. But if I now go back to the view, I can do an operation called Project Sketch. And if I go into the option window, in this case I'll just choose all the objects and just the active canvas, which is the one I've sketched this window profile on. And what that does is it now glues that sketch onto the 3D model, so I can tumble it around and see my sketch thinking in 3D. And you can see on these back surfaces how it's done it. It's just projected it through the whole model. So I can do that by sketching, or I can get quite ambitious as well and do it using my imported sketches to get a much more complex and sophisticated look. So here I'm just picking some of the surfaces, just the side surfaces. So I'll switch to just active objects, and I'm selecting the side sketch and doing Project Sketch. And I can do the same for the front image and project that on. And I've got a rear sketch as well, so I'll just pick the rear surfaces and the rear sketch, and I'll do a Project Sketch. So if I turn off my canvases, you'll see that what I've actually got now is very, very simple NURBS geometry, but with a much more complicated sketch projected onto it. So with very, very little modeling work, I'm starting to visualize my design in 3D very, very early on. Now, as I said, this relies on a technique called hardware shade, which I'm not going to cover in the tutorials, but there's a very useful essential videos option available on the help. And this will show you how to use the visualizer control panel with a library of materials and how to apply basic materials. And for this technique, you only need to understand it at a very basic level. So using hardware shade might be something you want to get into if you're going to spend a lot of time at the concept level. But for all users, the ability to simply sketch and annotate a model, either for communication or for your own thought processes, can be very useful.